It's a presentation that it's laced with research. Okay, a lot of background with theoretical and conceptual frameworks being used, but I'm going to give you a practical perspective on what's going on. And I'm hoping what you get out of the presentation is, when we're working with industry partners, how we go about our business really and solve problems. It's a very pragmatic perspective on responding to a particular problem. The title is around a feasibility study, but I'm going to expand that a little bit and show you a little bit more around what the overall project looks like, because it's got so many different angles to it. I think it'd be quite nice to share as much as I can with you. Really, I think about a year ago, Nike came to us, their global social and community impact team, and they said, we want to educate coaches in developing children's movement, and we've got this made-to-play portfolio. Show us how we can do that. And it came off the back of some previous work that I'd been doing in children's movement development. And they'd been at a conference, so there you go. Little things like that. They'd been to a conference I was in the States, listened to what I'd said and said, yeah, we want more of that, but there's a slight twist. And then I realised there's quite a lot of twists in terms of how different it is from the original work I was being involved in. So we developed and disseminated a thing called MOGBA, okay, movement-oriented games-based assessment. And what I want to do is talk you through the journey really. So that's where we are now. We've developed it. I want to take it all the way back to the start a little bit and show you the journey that we went on and where some of the research has been located within that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to explain a little bit about Nike's Made to Play initiative. It's huge. I've certainly never been involved in anything as big as this before in my academic career. A little bit of background as towards children's movement, so you kind of understand it a little bit and why we've solved the problem the way we have. I will report a little bit about the feasibility trial we ran in the summer, and then talk to you about next steps, because they're very interesting as well. For some reason, I've had some technical issues and I can't run this straight through, so at this stage, I've got to just show you this slightly separately. Keep my hands on myself. Just watching that. Pick up just a move, put her back up on the shelf. Kiss my little baby girl as me. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, just for kicks, yeah, your love is in a bit, so my heart to eclipse now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. I think it was worth it. So, what I need to do there, let's go back to that, is it? Oh, I've completely lost it.
If you go back to PowerPoint on the laptop screen.
On the bottom bar.
On the bottom bar there.
Come back to the window in front of you rather than the window on the board. Move your mouse to
I don't see anything happening here at the moment. You'll see when you get there.
So you just got extended desktop, so your mouse is here rather than there.
Thank you. Round of applause, please.
Right, that's it. Any questions?
Yeah. So, Made to Play. That's the breadth and scope of Made to Play. It features, Nike have a construct around what they call 12 global cities. So the kind of, these blue are how they centre their sales activity as well. This is not sales kind of thing going on here. This is the corporate and social responsibility arm. Yeah. What they do then, anything that is anything to do with Nike wraps around this map and this construct. So the project is working across the globe. Now in each of those places you then find a number of programs which Nike support, and that's through investment. It could be equipment, it could be coach support, it could be particularly around using sport for para good. There's a lot of say girls, they'll concentrate on girls specific, so girls inky somewhere, girls play, girls in the game, these types of things is one of the strands. A full range really of individual sport, multi-sport, there's coaching programs as well in there. It's about 100 different programs in the Made to Play initiative. And my job basically is to develop a resource for 8 to 12 year olds to be used by all those programs. Okay, that's 16 million children that you're affecting there. This is the backdrop to the project really. So that's a physical literacy framework, literally just been launched a couple of days ago in Australia. I won't mention Australia too many times, obviously, but you know, it'll be warmer there in January than it is here, I know that. What we're getting in lots of areas now, so the English government's saying Wales is very strong for physical literacy. Physical literacy is taking shape now in terms of frameworks. It's losing probably some of the original focus that maybe Margaret Whitehead talked about in the way that it's coming through, but ultimately it's dropping into these 4 different elements of a child's development. Okay? What I'm particularly interested in is the physical dimension of that. We've got a randomised control trial starting in January across 4 of these countries, and we are going to be touching on some of these other aspects, but ultimately for this presentation I'm going to show you what we've done with the physical dimension. The other backdrop is we have movement frameworks, and I'll speak to hopefully everybody in the audience here, whether you know about movement or not. So children across the lifespan will develop certain movements, and they'll, from babies, they'll toddle and they'll waddle and wobble, and then they'll gain stability in certain ways, and that'll give them the competence to be able to fulfill broader ambitions within their movement within life. So it's a lifespan model perspective. The interesting age for me is in this age range around fundamental movement skills for children roughly between the ages of 3 and 7. And then what happens then is once they've developed certain movement skills, they take it into these complex movement patterns. This area here is where we're at today for the presentation really. You know, as much as I love little babies and things, it's really where it starts getting interesting because it's school age that we try to focus on. We also use this construct of 3 different types of movement. Stability, which is what you're doing now. It's the ability to sit, for young children to be able to crawl effectively, and then be able to then use various stability in broader notions. Object control is what I'm doing here, what Jeff's doing with that cup. It's manipulating objects to be able to affect an outcome, whatever that may be. It might be with a ball, a frisbee, a racket, anything. Okay? And locomotion is moving from point A to point B in a number of different ways. We know them as the building blocks, okay, of more complex movements. We know that without, contested at the moment probably in some research, but we know that without certain movements, our ability to then take that into broader notions of movement is therefore going to be restricted. And it's what Seefeld calls this kind of movement proficiency barrier. If you don't have certain types of movements, you can imagine not being able to throw and cast your minds back to the playground activities you used to do and what limiting effect that would have on your ability to socialise effectively as well. The ability now to swim is becoming more of a physical literacy structure. I think in the past it was very traditionally formed around games, but now we start to think about the broader dimensions of movement across the full range of activities. So stability, object control, locomotion, building blocks of movement, and that's fine. And there's some of the movements you may associate with these building blocks for children between the ages of 4 and 7. That's what typically the primary school curriculum in Key Stage 1, that's where it starts. Elementary in the States is the same. We had a tool, a movement assessment tool, we've developed a tool for 4 to 7 year olds. It involves 14 movement tasks, stability, object control, locomotion, a bit of a recording device in terms of the measurement, and lots of video footage and animations to allow teachers, coaches to be able to assess fundamental movement skills. That's world leading in terms of it's designed specifically for use by teachers. There are lots of movement assessment tools, but it's for clinical uses. And I'm a movement specialist, so I can procure these instruments to go in and measure movement, but they weren't designed for practitioners. So that's really the first practitioner-based movement assessment tool for 4 to 7-year-olds, and that's what we had. But what we don't have so much of is the next phase. Is once the children have got those movements, is what they do with them next. Now in England, my theory is that what happens to children around the age of 6, 7 is that they go into sport-specific environments. Okay, if you've got children, I've got 2, but not children, they're adults, but you would generally move through into a netball club. If you're lucky, it'll be a multi-sport club. It'll be athletics, hockey, football, rugby, those types of community structures that you see. Now, yeah, they'll involve some of that. So, you know, the netball actions, for instance, will involve movement, but the focus is not on the movement. The focus is on the technical aspects of the sport. So all those made-to-play programs I told you, they're all looking at the sport. They're not looking at the movement. And that's a real issue for me, because if children are not quite there on that fundamental movement skill scale, then, and we're asking them to apply them into a sport-specific situation, before they've really matured those movements, we're going to be losing children in the mix. And that's one of the reasons I think Nike are really interested in that proposal, is to try and get these combinations of movements working, so children have that complexity they need to then be able to go into the sport. So we can see this as a bridge from movement focus, into that sport. The desktop study at the time suggested there are loads of assessments for this age range. There's some types of approaches that are being used globally. Teaching games for understanding is quite a big one. Sport education. There are models that we use for delivering games to children. Quite prevalent. Assessing specialised movement skills, those combined skills that I've just referred to. Can't find a single tool anywhere in the world that actually does that. Not scientifically, from a clinical perspective, and certainly not from a practitioner perspective. You get a lot of materials that show you how to deliver the activities, but nothing to show you how to assess that. And that's problematic. So MOGBA and what it's trying to do, a movement-oriented, games-based assessment for 8 to 12-year-olds, is unique. There's nothing else in the world like it. And Joe and I have just been going through some of the activities I'm going to show you. And the complexity and the difficulty I'm going to show you now really is why I think a lot of people have avoided it, because it's hard. It's hard to understand what we're trying to do. So that's the front page of the executive summary of the feasibility trial that we did over the summer. I'm going to give you the insight now of what the testers over the summer told us about how we designed the product. This was the timeline that we used. So over a year ago, the Youth Sport Trust were commissioned by Nike to develop something. I then got involved about this time last year as an advisor. We did a research scan. We started to design the activities in December. And by January, we formed an advisory group from people from Sheffield Hallam and then other universities around the world. We piloted this approach I'm going to show you here in earlier on in the year. It was about April by the time we got here, and also in Leeds as well. We had like two or three different pilot phases within that. We then decided how we wanted to go and measure that effectively, revise the tools for measurement, and then we piloted it across with 24 practitioners in the States. Okay, so we designed the product and we sent it out to them to have a go of it. And then what we did earlier on over the summer, we revised it. I'm going to show you where some of those revisions have made. These are some of the people I spoke to in the summer. So we sent them 6 cards that we'd developed. I'll show you the card in a second. And we said, right, try these. So it was people like, the role was education and training. You've got this marathon kids coach, you've got a teacher, you've got a sports coach, a police officer. There's someone who actually owned a program, you've got a health and wellness teacher, a soccer coach, sports coach, quite a lot of soccer going on with some of the programs there as well. And a whole range of length of service, if you like, within those roles. And we wanted them to give us some straightforward feedback. We wanted them to give us feedback, and we used a thing called the feasibility framework. Anyone ever used the feasibility framework in the past? Anyone within your research? So probably Steve and Jeff, you might have seen like re-aim, realist evaluation, those types of things. I've used them in the past. What this does really, it says, we've got something for you, tell us whether you think it's going to work or not. Okay. And what Bowen does, and if this is from like social housing projects and things like that, is do they accept it? What's the demand for it? How do they implement it? Is it practical? Do they have to adapt it? How do they integrate it? And if they were going to use it for expansion, how would they use it? So you've got to remember, there's over 100 made-to-play programs, yeah? And we need to really come up with an homogeneous framework that could assess that eclectic nature of those programs. So these are the cards that we sent them, first off. This is a great game. If you ever played a wet weather session at school, cast your minds back for that. This is a classic wet weather session, okay? And you get a lot of them in England, don't you? So I spent a lot of time developing quite a lot of these activities with my kids when I was head of PE, and quite a lot of these games were created by kids, which would make it even better. So this is a game called Square Ball. The outcome of the game is, you see this girl here, she's trying to hit, she's come from the yellow team, she can hit either of these three benches and score a point, basically. The premise of the game, without going too much into it, is it's an activity which at this stage, it's quite a simple, straightforward activity. It's got QR code on there so they can look at, a teacher can just use the camera to scan that and it plays in the video from YouTube, basically. It's got some instructions here, and it's got this little skillometer here to show them that object control is the focus. It's got this mega busy thing going on here, which says if you want to change the challenge, you can change it by adjusting the space, the effort, and the relationships. If you've studied movement development at all, any type of motor development, this is a classic Gallagher and Osmond framework. They say that in the specialised movement space, you should get them to think about the space, the effort, and the relationships they're using when they're doing that movement. Okay? And being clever and a bit kind of cocky, we thought, yeah, bring that in, they'll love that. We had some real issues. I don't know what you think about that card, but I have no idea how I ever thought that was going to stand the test of time. When we look at it, it's the busiest card you've ever seen in your life. So it was a complete dump of theory and constructs, trying to put things across in innovative ways, using these QR codes to maybe advise, and it was a nightmare. One of the first points of response, and these are really keen practitioners who want to make things work. A lot of people in America generally, I think their general mindset is give us something, we'll try it. But there's an overwhelming element to this, there's just too much on the card. So if you ever get involved in a resource development, point number one from a feasibility point of view is it can't be too overwhelming, it's got to be basic, it's got to be simple. Oh God, I've got to come off this screen again now. Here we go. Right, I couldn't actually, again, embed these without issues happening, so let me just see if I can, no, you're not seeing that.
Drag the window to the left and just keep dragging. If that doesn't work, go to the right. I can't remember.
Your left or my left?
Go. We haven't got time. Go down.
Yeah, come and help me. Thanks. Right, I've completely messed that up now, actually.
A couple of minutes left.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
See you on this one.
Yeah. So that's the card as it looks now. You can see the simplicity now. The activity is much easier. We had some real issues, so gender neutral, ethnicity neutral now, whereas the previous illustration we were finding it difficult to represent. These are designed for the favelas of Brazil. For Middle East countries, we were finding it difficult to represent the full range of children, so we went to a gender neutral, ethnicity neutral type of character, cut down everything we could and just put the very basic elements onto that front sheet, which is obviously the activity card. And then the assessment, we've reduced the assessment now, and the criteria has been reduced. So all we're doing now is looking for 2 particular body components and criteria within that, and trying to so within the activity, there's an activity delivered, and we're looking at one particular movement focus. So I just thought it'd be good for you to see those guys. You want to bring us back into the... How are you doing this?
It's just another screen.
Thank you. So really, to reduce that, to be able to reduce it, we've had to separate the resource into movement cards at the top there, an introduction, movement cards, change the challenge we've separated, and then some full assessment ideas there. So the resource has changed completely in terms of what we need to be able to do with it, based on a lot of that initial feedback. So next steps really, so we've got this resource now, it involves 15 different activities of increasing complexity, an assessment focus within it. We'll launch next month in the UK, 6 national governing bodies looking at the programme, and then in the US we launch early in the new year. That'll be to 60 sites, and on the 60 sites we've got research programmes looking at what impact that has on children's self-confidence, and self-competence as well, so a bit of physical in there and a little bit of enjoyment as well. We've also got impacts on practitioners, we're going to survey them and ask them how they use the resource effectively. I have to travel to 5 case study sites, and there we'll use some more immersive methods around observation, a little bit more getting the children to respond to MOGBA, use graffiti boards, a little bit of role play, so the case study is really a little bit more immersive in what we're doing. And the randomised control trial, a 9-week intervention in schools in 4 different countries. So using MOGBA for 9 weeks, a total of about 800 children to give us a global RCT basically, and that starts in January. That's been registered in Australia already. So we kick that off. I'm in Dublin tomorrow, actually putting together the delivery training for that. So MOGBA then, next steps, really to take that and to monitor and evaluate it as it goes onto the ground, not just in the Made to Play portfolio, but more broadly, and then within an RCT as well, where we can control some of those variables. Just wanted to show you the different people we've got involved in the project. So Dublin City University, John Moores, University of Newcastle, Ohio State, all involved in developing that resource with us. Really. And that's time. Thanks very much.
A couple of questions, if that's all right.
Thank you for that.
For goodness for the PhD student.
For the last question, so okay, this is way out of my world, so apologies for the really stupid question about class. So MOGBA is both an assessment tool and a feedback tool, which is an intervention in its own right. So the assessment is also the intervention.
Yeah, for someone that's way out of your depth, that's a really astute question and observation. It is. So you will get effect by delivering an activity and assessing in that activity. So we're not comparing it with another assessment tool. It's not a convergent validity experiment or anything like that. It's just saying we will make change to children by assessing them. Whether that's a valid and reliable tool or not, it doesn't matter. It's just the fact we integrate delivery and assessment into one intervention.
Right, that's interesting, I suppose, coming from the technological side, because all the wearables that people have, in effect, kind of doing a similar thing. They're both an assessment and an intervention at the same time. It's quite difficult to separate them out. So your RCT is attempting to separate out the intervention versus the assessment, is it? Or can you not do that?
We can't do it at this stage. I think that's 2021, 22. Okay. So at this stage, all we'll do, the RCT basically, is 9 weeks. We'll use a different assessment tool to assess the movement of children at the start and at the end.
Right.
So we'll use a thing called Dragon Challenge, which has just been developed by colleagues at Swansea, with Gareth Stratton and those guys. So they've just finished developing that. We'll use that tool assess every child at the start and at the end, and hypothesise there will be an improvement in movement competence as a result of MOGBA over 9 weeks.
Yeah.
basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
Well, what could be the control for that group?
The control for that group is a school because it's lodged in PE. The RCT we had to control it. We were going to do it across some of the programmes and made to play in the two disparate. So the RCT is in schools, in PE lessons. So the control is a school that is not using MOGBA. It's just delivering a normal national curriculum. So there are some issues around what is normal there, and making sure the fidelity is critical in it really. Make sure we get some fidelity assessment within that. But yeah, that
That's
is
learning ethical and not holding kids back from learning skills.
well, it's a waitlist group anyway, so I think in that respect they'll get it. They'll all get it. It just means that some schools will get a little bit later than others.
Sure. Okay. Any other- Please.
What kind of capacity, and if it is in there, what are the guidelines around kind of differentiation in both the movement and games that are in there and the assessment of the children partaking in it?
So there's differentiation, and that's a really good question, because what we've had to do is understand what the kind of baseline perspective is, so every child enters that. And this is my question to we've got an advisory group we make every week. So I wasn't sure that if we went straight into the game, for instance, because their comment is the uniqueness of MOGBA is it's assessed within a game. But my thoughts were, what happens if children go to that game and have not got the prerequisite skills necessary? So the point number one is make sure that children are assessed for movement in the first iteration. The level of differentiation then, from there, we have a separate section, I didn't actually go into the section on differentiation, which looks at manipulating space, effort and relationships. And the work that Joe's doing with us now is getting us to think about how we can condition that game to allow every child to succeed within it, outside of the assessment really, and not get too bogged down with the assessment, but make sure the game is doing something for every child that's involved. So yeah, there's a separate section, I didn't concentrate on it really, but space, effort, relationships is what it's about as well.
I'm going to go on. If it's a quick one.
I was just interested in the kind of guiding philosophy behind the projects and whether it was intended to, I don't mean to dichotomous, but sort of promote children's right to play access, or if it was more about kind of promoting sporting proficiency and kind of physiological prowess, or somewhere in
Yeah.
the middle.
It's not the latter. So my background is talent development and using these types of programs to, pyramid type of thing, children into certain programs and pathways. It's saying that it's probably to counter some of the issues with national governing bodies of sport, who are at the launch next month, to say, look, you're going too hard, too early with the technical and tactical approaches of your sport. Yeah, you haven't got an alternative at the moment. You don't know what the specialised movement looks like. We'll give you that, so you don't have an excuse, basically. Because we just think we're losing quite a lot of children. And Nike have recognised their programmes within Made to Play are maybe not movement focused enough. So that's, to be fair, that's exactly where we're from. We're not about. There is a performance route. I'm presented at a coaching conference week after next, an international one, and there will be questions about, does it have that? And yes, it does. It's learning to train and long-term athlete development. But that's not the point. It's about saying let's develop movement first, because we know there's a positive relationship between movement, competence, and physical activity. So we know that children will be more physically active if they're more competent movers, and that's where we're coming from, really.
Great.